Okay, let's dive into this. What if the solution to modern America's absolute biggest financial crisis was actually written down 200 years ago? Welcome to today's Explainer. We're unpacking a really fascinating and highly consequential clash happening right now between traditional Wall Street economics and the strategies of the new administration. Today, we're digging into source material that breaks down a massive shift in how the government plans to handle the national debt, inflation, and American manufacturing. Honestly, it's a story about totally throwing out conventional financial models and reaching way back into American history for a pretty radical solution. Here is a quick roadmap of how we'll unpack the source material today. 1. The $40 trillion debt bomb. 2. The secret Hamiltonian plan. 3. Speculation versus productive credit. 4. The cost of free trade. And finally, 5. Rebuilding American manufacturing. All right, let's get right into Section 1, the $40 trillion debt bomb. This is the central, unavoidable problem that both the political and financial spheres are wrestling with right now. $40 trillion. Just to put that incredibly massive figure into perspective for a second, if you had spent $1 million every single day since Jesus was born, you wouldn't even be a quarter of the way to $40 trillion. It's almost unfathomable. The source actually refers to this as a looming bond market explosion. It is the hottest topic in the financial press today, and it's this immense roadblock that literally any incoming economic policy has to address head-on before they can do anything else. Now, to understand the current administration's starting point, the source highlights this quote from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. The source explains Bessent's argument, which is that this current debt bomb was inherited directly from the previous administration's spending policies. He points out that the Biden administration ran the highest deficit to GDP ratio in history for a period when the country was neither actively at war nor in an economic recession. Essentially, this metric means the government was spending drastically more than the country was producing, basically maxing out the national credit card during a time of relative peace. So how on earth do you handle a debt that massive? Just intense austerity? Well, according to Vice President J.D. Vance, as highlighted in the source material, the administration's discrete plan isn't actually about severe austerity. They aren't just looking to slash everything across the board. Instead, the primary goal is sheer economic velocity. They are aiming for a growth rate that actually outpaces the accumulating debt. The goal is to build an economy so robust and so active that it essentially just outgrows the $40 trillion problem entirely. Which brings us to Section 2, the secret Hamiltonian plan. Now, what's really interesting here is that to accomplish this massive growth, they aren't looking to modern Wall Street at all. The source claims Bessent's strategy is basically Alexander Hamilton's original post-Revolutionary War playbook, but put on steroids. Think back to when America was a brand new, flat-broke nation. Hamilton didn't default. Step 1, he paid off old war debts at full value, using government bonds to establish absolute credibility. Step 2, he built a national bank to accept those newly issued bonds. But step 3, and this is the absolute genius part that the source emphasizes, he ensured that this bank financed only real production. We're talking merchants, factories, infrastructure, and crucial inventions. He essentially used debt as an engine for tangible economic growth rather than pure financial speculation. He wanted to build a nation that could literally outproduce its liabilities. And this highlights a fundamental clash of economic philosophies detailed in the source. On one side, you have the traditional Wall Street or London model. The source characterizes this by its focus on speculation, bailouts, consumption-driven economies, and endlessly chasing those lowest-cost global supply chains. On the flip side, we have the Hamiltonian or American model. This focuses on productive credit, domestic manufacturing, physically expanding the supply of goods, and upskilling the labor force. The core difference here? It's all about how each model views the ultimate purpose of capital. This is not just some academic debate. It dictates whether an economy is built on actually making things or just buying things. Let's move to Section 3, speculation versus productive credit. To really grasp this Hamiltonian approach, we need to dive into the core macroeconomic theory presented in the source. The source argues incredibly heavily for this concept of productive credit. Basically, the idea is that if you issue credit for hard commodity output, infrastructure, or technological development, it's actually non-inflationary and maybe even deflationary over time. Think about it like this. If you print $1 million just to hand it out, you suddenly have 5 people bidding on the exact same loaf of bread, right? Prices skyrocket. But if you take that same $1 million and use it as productive credit to build 5 brand new state-of-the-art bakeries, you've physically expanded the total supply of bread. Because there's way more supply to go around, prices actually drop. Funding tangible production creates more supply, and this is in direct contrast to the Wall Street model of using credit to fund consumer services or massive financial bailouts. And they have very specific targets in mind for this productive credit. We are talking about the heavy hitters that Treasury Secretary Bessent identifies as critical to national security: semiconductors, AI, quantum computing, advanced manufacturing, shipbuilding, critical minerals, and pharmaceuticals. The source points out a major philosophical shift happening right here. For years, the global commercial class would just look at a map and ask one question: where is the lowest cost, and ship operations there. But this new Hamiltonian model views these high-tech sectors as the foundational sources of American national power that absolutely must be built and maintained domestically. So, why does the source claim traditional Wall Street economists think this whole strategy is completely crazy? Well, it literally comes down to their spreadsheets. Traditional models often measure economic activity through daily stock speculation and asset purchases. When they see a massive debt burden, their models only give them two options: spend less or tax more. The source argues that these traditional economists are essentially trapped in their own formulas. They completely fail to account for a third option, which is dramatically growing the physical, productive base of the country until the debt just naturally shrinks in comparison. Their models simply don't have a mathematical mechanism for this type of productive real-world growth. And let me tell you, the scale of this proposed growth is wild. The source details incredibly ambitious, futuristic goals from recent executive orders. We are talking about launching large-scale nuclear power, developing revolutionary fusion power, and yes, even establishing a literal moon colony by 2028. It's all about directing massive amounts of capital away from daily stock market day trading and injecting it straight into frontier science to completely redefine the economy of the future. But what about the return on investment? Well, the source points to the original Apollo program as the ultimate proof of concept for why this works. The claim is that competent economists know every single dollar invested in that level of advanced, large-scale scientific programming yields an $8 to $10 return in real economic output across the broader economy. That is the massive multiplier effect of the Hamiltonian model in action. All right. Section 4. The cost of free trade. Because this explainer isn't just about abstract macroeconomic theories. The source material turns to the very concrete human impact of these policies. The source presents a really stark, emotional argument from a speech Vice President J.D. Vance gave in his hometown of Middletown, Ohio. Vance directly links the policies of globalized free trade and open borders to devastating local consequences. He argues that the opioid crisis exploded in the exact geographic locations where industrial jobs were shipped overseas. This, he argues, brought cartels into the void and left millions of orphan children in their wake. The source summarizes Vance's critique of the elite financial class through this tragic lens of deaths of despair. The argument reported here is that by endlessly chasing cheap international labor just to pad the bottom line, traditional economic models decimated American hometowns, hollowed out the working class, and caused severe, measurable social destruction. It is a very heavy critique of what actually happens when financial efficiency on a spreadsheet completely ignores human collateral in the real world. Which leads us to Section 5, Rebuilding American Manufacturing. So the crucial point is, how is this administration actually attempting to reverse this trend in the real world today? The source highlights a massive, specific milestone that was announced during that very same Middletown speech: a $1 billion investment by Cleveland-Cliffs in transformational manufacturing, right there in Middletown, Ohio. The source frames this $1 billion injection not just as some random corporate decision, but as the first tangible proof of abandoning the old free trade model and actually implementing policies that prioritize domestic production. And as the explainer draws to a close, the source makes a really forceful concluding argument. They report that traditional free trade proponents and financial elites have repeatedly made totally incorrect predictions over the last few years. The elites claimed tariffs would definitely create inflation. They claimed conflicts in the Middle East would create a paralyzing oil shock. They claimed halting illegal immigration would create a massive labor shortage. The source argues they were wrong every single time, simply because their models assume a world of fixed resources, rendering them completely blind to the real economics of expanding production. Which leaves us with this final, overarching question to consider based on today's source material. Can an economy that is fueled by productive credit, domestic manufacturing, and frontier science actually outpace and outgrow a $40 trillion debt bomb? Is this 200-year-old Hamiltonian model truly the ultimate fix for our modern financial crisis? Or is the math of the debt just simply too vast to overcome? It is a clash of economic worlds that will absolutely define the next century. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.